With great power comes great responsibility. Hey guys, I'm Ian. Super excited to continue in our walkthrough of the devotional series, What is Your True Identity? By Kevin Barnett. And today we're going to be talking about one of the most influential superheroes of all time, Spider-Man. I love that statement. With great power comes great responsibility. See, in the chapter we talk about where our power comes from, and thus the responsibility we carry as people that carry God's power forward in the world. Now, we may not be able to climb walls or shoot webs, but the way that we impact people's lives, right, the way we traverse our day-to-day life has to reflect the character of God, right? As we're swinging through our daily life, we have interactions and encounters where we get to choose whether we want to be responsible or arrogant or false or fake. In the chapter, we talk about the difference between Spider-Man and Mysterio. And one of the things I always loved about Spider-Man's Rose Gallery is many of them reflect this idea of the difference between power and responsibility. Green Goblin's someone who has immense power financially and status, and yet he uses it for his own gain, his own power. Right? He's not responsible with it, and he destroys people's lives in his wake, like Gwen Stacy. You have other characters like Doc Ock and the Lizard who have great mental power, and yet they use it for themselves, to help themselves instead of helping the people around them. And in doing so, they become more of a hindrance both in their own life and in the lives of their family and those around them. But I think Quentin Beck Mysterio is a great example of how power and responsibility, when they're not balanced, create something very dangerous. The sad thing about Quentin Beck, especially in the MCU, is he could probably be a great superhero. Think about how his illusion technology would affect a character like Thanos, or dealing with Baron Zemo, or dealing with any of these other threats that are coming up. It allows him a way to combat an opponent without putting himself and his team at risk, but instead he chooses to give himself more power. Right? He creates false responsibilities to keep himself busy and keep himself in the limelight. But instead, Peter, Spider-Man, has to struggle with responsibility. Knowing right from wrong, he has to make those active decisions of, am I going to do the right thing? Am I going to be responsible? Or am I going to do what I want to do? Far From Home has a great example of that, as Peter really doesn't want to be part of that story. He just wants to be a teenager living a normal life. It's a very similar story to what we see in Far From Home and Spider-Man 2. Both of the sequels of the Spider-Man trilogies deal with this idea of Peter no longer wanting to be Spider-Man and having to choose and make those decisions so that he could actually be the hero he's meant to be. Part of being responsible is integrity, right? Peter has to choose to constantly be Spider-Man. That the world's always going to need Spider-Man. And so he always has to be ready to be Spider-Man. In the same way, all of us have a decision we can choose to make. We can live, right, doing the things that please us and feel comfortable, being irresponsible, using the gifts and the things of God to self-serve ourselves, to create an illusion of the things we think we want. Or we can choose to sometimes sacrifice, right? I think we've all heard, Spider-Man's a menace, right? J. Jonah Jameson and, even Aunt May tends not to have a positive outlook towards Spider-Man in the comics. His relationship with, whether it's Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy, or Betty Brant, or any of the other characters Peter has dated in his long history in the comics, have almost always been affected by his inability to make time for them above the responsibilities that he had. It's going to cause sacrifice. God is the first thing in your life, there's going to be tough decisions you have to make. There's going to be times where you need to be somewhere where God needs you instead of being where you want to be. And in doing so, we become more responsible, but that also allows God to give us more power, more ability. And in doing so, instead of seeking power of the world the way the world does, only to build itself up, to make itself stronger, to make itself more sinister, if you will, instead, we use power to build up others. One of my favorite things about Spider-Man is how many of his villains actually get reformed. See, in the comics, characters have reformation arcs, and sometimes they don't last, and sometimes they do. But I love the fact that Eddie Brock is an Avenger now in the comics. Flash Thompson is anti-Venom and is now going around being a superhero, impacting the world around him. Connors constantly goes back to Spider-Man when he needs help. All these different villains, and the list goes on and on. Doc Ock getting redeemed and Superior Spider-Man and seeking to be a better man because of his interactions with Peter. Peter Parker's power actively, because he's responsible, actively changes the people who think their job is to be his enemy. And it makes them more responsible people. Your responsibility changes other people's lives. And not just bad people, but good people. I love Miles Morales, right, and all the other Spider-Men that were raised up under Peter's tutelage. All characters that Peter has had a voice in now as he's growing up and becoming the middle generation of superheroes with new superheroes coming in behind him. He's being an influence in a life and being responsible to build them up, even when it's inconvenient for him. So if you want to be amazing, you want to be spectacular, you want to be a world-changing kind of person, start with just being friendly in your neighborhood, being responsible in the places you are today, and taking the power that God's given you into the environments where it's needed. With great power must come great responsibility. If we're only seeking power for power's sake, it will destroy us. But if we seek power to be more responsible, to help others, to love and serve others, that redefines our identity. So that we're people that are willing to make the tough choices for the greater good. I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful week. Again, the book is What is Your True Identity by Kevin Barnett. If you want to keep joining us here, like, comment, subscribe, and yeah.